The positive 2 gives me negative 10. And I have w times w is w squared. And then negative 5 times negative 7 is positive 35 w. I now need to combine any like terms I have. So v squareds, vw's, w squareds, w's. Do I have any like terms? I think my only like terms are here, my vw and my vw. Everything else is not the same. So the 6v squared will come down. Positive 4 and negative 15 is negative 11 vw minus 14v. I'll put my 35w in here and then negative 10w squared. Just out of habit, doesn't really matter how you do it. That'll work. As long as you have all those terms and you've simplified or combined your VWs together, you're going to be okay. It doesn't really matter what order they're in. Just knowing that on a test, it's going to be multiple choice, and if your terms are not the same as the solutions that are there, you need to be able to kind of think and say, okay, that's the same answer as mine, except my terms are just in a different order. So it's just something that kind of will happen. Looks like we have about 7 minutes left. I want to maybe go through a couple more questions. This was the number 4 here on the next page, was the one that had a typo in it. And as I was going through it, I noticed it and then it was just wrong. So my typo is here, 4k minus 3k. We can just simplify those and that's just 1k. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get rid of the whole question. I wrote a completely new question, something a little easier. So we'll call it 4a, and then I'll write a b over here. So 4a is 5 minus 2x, and then this is squared. And then for b, well, let's just do 4a for now, and then I'll do b in a second. You're going to see a few questions like this where something is squared. And I've talked about these things before when we were dealing with radicals. If you have something in brackets that's squared, the squared means you're multiplying the thing by itself. So you don't need to write this down. If I had x squared, that's the same as x times x. Or if I have 4 squared, that's the same thing as 4 times 4. So if I have a binomial, would that same rule not apply? And it will. So I'm going to take this 5 minus 2x and write it twice because it's squared. Anything squared is something multiplied by itself. At this point, it's the same as all the other FOIL questions we've done. You need to multiply each thing in the first bracket by each thing in the second. And it just kind of works out. There's a bit of a trick that you can learn after you do a bunch of them, but we'll just do it as is for now. So we're going to multiply the 5 by both things in the second bracket. So 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times the 2x is negative 10x. So there's my first 2. I'm going to take this 2x and multiply it by, or negative 2x, sorry, by the both terms in the second bracket. So negative 2x times 5 is negative 10x again. And 2 gives me positive 4x squared. Combining like terms, I have these 10x's in the middle here, so I'm going to combine those together. 25 minus 20x plus 4x squared. That is that. You'll notice after you do a bunch of these multiplication type questions that are squared, if you have the squared on the outside, the trick is this. I'll just say it. It might not make a lot of sense right now. You square the first term, so 5 squared gives me 25. You square the second term, this 2x squared gives me 4x squared. And then if I multiply these things together in the middle and double them, I end up with the 20x. So 5 times negative 2 is negative 10x. Doubled, it's 20x. Anytime you're squaring something it'll always follow that same sort of process. So something that you'll see over time after you've done a few of those type of questions, I wouldn't call it a trick necessarily, just kind of something that you'll just see that happens. They're all kind of common in that regard. Let's do... I don't want to do that one. Let's just jump down to the bottom here. There's one at the bottom. There's another typo in here. This 2 should be a 3. So let's change that to a 3. And I'm going to do this question, then we'll call her a day. Probably won't have enough room for it. We're going to do it anyways. Same thing as I was saying before with squared type questions. If I had something like 4 cubed, that's 4 times 4 times 4. So same thing applies here. I'm going to take this 3x squared minus 2, and I'm going to multiply it by 3x squared minus 2, and then I'm going to multiply it by 3x squared minus 2. And that's a lot of stuff, right? You've got 3 of these things. How am I going to multiply all 3 things at the same time? And the answer is you don't. What you do is you isolate the first 2, or any 2 for that matter. You're going to multiply those together. Just kind of ignore the second one for now. And then you're going to end up with a trinomial. So I'm just going to drop this guy down. It's going to end up actually probably more over here after I multiply the first 2 together. But let's FOIL the first 2. So 3 times 3 is 9. X times x, or x squared times x squared is x to the 4. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6x squared. And then we end up with the same thing, negative 6x squared. And then plus 4. We take all of that stuff, and I'm just going to bring down this 3x squared minus 2. Just going to come along. Haven't done anything with it yet. I'm going to combine my like terms here. 9x to the 4 minus 12x squared plus 4. And then I still have this 3x squared minus 2. Now at this point, you're taking a trinomial and multiplying it by a binomial. So each thing in the first bracket needs to get multiplied by the second bracket. I have about 1 minute left, so I'm just going to fly through this. Hopefully I don't lose too many of you. 9x to the 4 times 3x squared. 9 and 3 is 27. X to the 6 minus 18x to the 4 minus 36x to the 4 plus 24x squared plus 12x squared minus 8. That was a lot. Combining my like terms. 27x to the 6 I can't do anything with. You'll see that I have x to the 4 here, x to the 4, and I have x squared, x squared. And that's where I end up with that guy. So, a bit of a long one, a lot of spots to kind of lose your way, but when you just spend time doing these type of question, it's always the same. You're multiplying, you're adding exponents, you're combining like terms, and that's kind of it. So last day I mentioned on the learning guide where we should be up to. I do realize that I gave you guys that midterm review, or it's been there for a while, but you now are aware of it, so I don't want to say you have to do a ton of this stuff, but we finished up to basically almost the end of page 2. Now you should be able to finish up to, this is FOIL, a little more difficult FOIL type question. Using the rectangle method and the column method you'll see in the questions, You don't need to necessarily do the column method or do the area method. If you just want to expand them, you can. If you want to look at the column method or the area method, they're in the actual course lessons. So I'm not going to go through those methods. If you like to use them and you want to use them, great. I'm not going to teach it because I just don't have time and I don't think it's really that important. But some people like the sort of the visual representation of these things. So like 4 using the area. If you want to just multiply these things together and FOIL them and get the answer, great. If you want to use the area method, look it up, do it that way, that's fine. You should be everything up to algebra tiles. So up to page 5. So this is up to lesson 2 and 3. I haven't talked about algebra tiles. I will. That's kind of where we're at. So next day, if you guys have any questions, I'd love to go through them. I don't want to keep you any longer. So spend some time doing that stuff. We'll say maybe, what's today? Lesson 2. Tomorrow, no. Maybe Wednesday or Thursday's class, I'll do a full review for the midterm review. And I'm not sure. We'll see where I end up with. So either Wednesday or Thursday for sure, we'll just dedicate that whole block to just the unit review, the first 4 units that we've gone through. So everything up to the end of today's class will be on the midterm. Everything from tomorrow and the next day, or the 2 more classes that we do this week on Unit 4, will not be on the midterm. So tonight, I'd recommend you maybe have a little bit of a look at the midterm review, just so you kind of get a feel for what stuff we've gone through. It shouldn't take you a long time because it's all stuff we've done. So I apologize for keeping you an extra 2 minutes today, but we'll take it up next day and see where everyone's at. So have a good afternoon, guys, and we'll see you tomorrow.